I now have the pleasure of introducing Andrew Pask, who's going to introduce our speaker tonight. Andrew is director of the Vancouver Public Space Network. I'm not going to tell you anything about that. Andrew is. So, Andrew, please join.
Thank you, Gord. Thank you very much. And again, on behalf of SFU's City program, TransLink, and the City of Vancouver, and my organization, the Vancouver Public Space Network, a warm welcome to everyone. We're very, very glad that you could make it this evening. So glad, in fact, because not only do we have the fall weather to contend with, or the fallish weather, but we also have the Olympics. We're in the midst of the euphoria, or the hand-wringing. It's sometimes hard to tell them apart. And ironically, so much of the Olympics is about getting from point A to point B, from the starting line to finish line, in as few seconds as possible. Tonight, however, we're going to talk about a much more human, more everyday form of mobility. And for that, we are very delighted to have Mr. Gil Peñalosa present. I'm going to tell you about Mr. Peñalosa in a moment. I'm also going to try very, very briefly to set the stage for Mr. Peñalosa's presentation by telling you a little bit about the context of cycling and walking and public transit in Vancouver, some of the current goings-on, and some of the bigger picture. I'm going to talk about some of our hopes for this evening because we want to get from words to action. And I'm also going to try and do this as far as the saying goes, with a few words from our sponsors as well. I'm going to do a bit of an Olympic challenge myself and try to represent the City of Vancouver and TransLink in the opening remarks, because we all had things that we wanted to say, but we decided maybe one person should say them, not three. Before anything else, though, I'd like to take a moment just to acknowledge the unceded Squamish territory on which we're meeting this evening. Okay, so we're here this evening. We're here because we are interested, presumably, in cycling and biking, in sustainability and healthy living, and in the public realm. And there's an awful lot to talk about in terms of Vancouver's healthy lifestyle. It's true. Compared to many cities in Canada, we have a lot of good things going on. Some of it, of course, involves Lululemon and the fashionability of the city's outdoor-friendly lifestyle, which everyone talks about. But much of it actually involves the everyday activities of those who live and move around in the city. We're becoming greener, or at least more conscious of how to be green. And this manifests itself in everything from dietary choices to concerns about plastic bottles and plastic bags to the way that we move around. There are good things happening. And it's our hope as co-sponsors that we can continue on this path in new and bolder ways. It will be, and will have to be, a collaborative effort. So you notice, in fact, that we're going to kick things off in that respect with the microphones. Following Mr. Peñalosa's presentation this evening, there will be an opportunity for questions and answers, for sharing. There are a few things to note about this. One, there's lots of you here, and Mr. Peñalosa tends to give a bang-up presentation that gets lots of questions and answers and thinking going. So we just ask you to be respectful of the fact that there will be a number of people that want to speak as well, and we would like to have the opportunity to share that with as many people as possible. Second, when you listen to Mr. Peñalosa this evening, let's try to think collectively of ways to advance the cause of walking and cycling, of sustainable transportation and public space. All of the sponsors this evening want to use this forum as a bit of a catalyst to make sure that we do go beyond words and more into action. Mr. Peñalosa will be sharing some of his stories and examples from around the world. If you've got ones you'd like to share, please do so. Again, just be mindful of the time. Third, we do want to keep the dialogue going beyond this. So as Gord said, there are sign-up lists out the front. There are a number of organizations represented, so sign up for all of them. We'd all like to keep in touch with you, and heck, what's a few more emails in this age. We're also videoing this evening's talk for posterity. The video will be available for viewing publicly. It will be a resource that we'd like to encourage you all to use down the road, and it should be done and online in a matter of about a week and a half. So that's a bit of the mechanics. First, a bit of background. I'd like to tell you a little bit about some of the current initiatives that our sponsors are working on, some of what we are doing. Then I'm going to tell you a little bit about some of the situation in Vancouver, and then we're going to get to maybe where we could be, and that's where Mr. Peñalosa comes in. So first, a few words from TransLink. Well, TransLink, as you know, they're the SkyTrain people, or the bus people, but they are also, in their words, an integrated multimodal transportation authority responsible for managing and operating the regional transportation system. That came out of one of their visioning sessions, you can bet. But they've also done some very good work in terms of developing a long-range plan, and you may have read in the paper that they've just released Transport 2040. Now, the interesting thing about this plan is that they've set a target of having more than half of the trips made in the city made by walking, cycling, or public transit by 2040. This is a very ambitious goal, as I will tell you in a second, but it's something that's quite doable. It's something, however, that requires collaboration. One of the things that TransLink is doing right now is having public dialogue and consultation sessions, and they're looking for people to give input on the plans that they've developed. So this is a shot of their website. They're looking for people to share their thoughts about the future of cycling in particular in Metro Vancouver, and they're looking for people to provide some comments. So please do go to their webpage and look up the Regional Bicycle Plan. The City of Vancouver, also one of our sponsors this evening, has started a bicycle network, as you know, almost 15 or 16 years ago. It was a collaboration between city staff and local advocates, and it's really taken off since then. They had the Adenac Bikeway as the first one, and they now have over 400 lane kilometers of bicycle facilities. Quite impressive. Since 1995, the city has actually started to include things like bylaws that encourage end-of-trip facilities for bicycles in all new developments. And they've been working on bicycle networks in complement with the city's greenways. They spend over $4 million a year on bicycle greenways and bicycleways throughout the city. And as well, obviously, hoping that more and more people will take advantage of these. There's a couple of other interesting facts that I was handed right before this evening's talk that I thought were worth sharing about the City of Vancouver. We actually have one of the highest pedestrian signal plans in North America, meaning that we have more than almost any other city. And in addition, we were awarded very recently the Best Walking City Award in North America, and that was in 2008. So that's a very laudable accolade and something that we deserve a lot of credit for collectively. Finally, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my organization, but not much, because I'm hoping that you'll all sign up and let us tell you a little bit more electronically. We do advocacy, education, and outreach about the public realm. We started as a little grassroots organization in that best kitchen table sense of the word. We had about 12 of us at one point. We now have about 1,000. We work on a whole variety of plans, and as far as this evening's presentation go, we tend to focus on the public realm angle. We've got a competition that we're launching very recently around a public square for Vancouver, because we don't have one. And we figure not only do we need great transportation alternatives, walking and biking and so on, but we also need some very good public realm destinations. We've got some, we don't have a public square, so let's figure out where it might go. We're also doing some research on bicycle infrastructure and have some collaborations in the hopper with the Car Free Vancouver folks who, as you all know, started Vancouver's Car Free Festival, which is now spread to 4 locations around the city. There are also a number of other organizations represented here. They've got some literature at the front, and I encourage you to have a look at it and pick it up and take it home. So that's the marketing spiel, and this, I hope, doesn't sound too laudatory unnecessarily. There's all sorts of good things in the work, but there's also a reality to the cycling situation and the biking and public transit situation in Vancouver. First, what do the numbers say? Well, one, there's actually not enough numbers. We don't do a good enough job of collecting data on how it is that we move around the city, and that needs to change. Statistics Canada has come up with some of the best and most useful, and I just thought I'd share a couple of charts here so that you can see how the city and region stack up with their transportation. As you can see, regionally, Metro Vancouver has about a 67.3% rate of folks that like to drive to work. Vancouver is a little bit less. And indeed, in all of the 3 sustainable transport options, public transit, walking, and cycling, the city seems to be doing fairly good overall. If you look at it over time, there's an even more encouraging sign. Whereas in the region, the rate of driving seems to be holding still. In Vancouver, it's actually going down. The rate of public transit usage is pretty good, and it's increased by 6% since the last census. The percentage of walking has gone up, as has cycling. So these are all very, very good signs. If you look at it regionally, though, it's very interesting. One of the things that's kind of neat about this is that if you look at the Census Canada census tract level stuff, you can begin to see how this actually works on the city level. This is the map for public transit and how people get to work. And I should qualify this by saying that these figures from StatsCan are strictly how people commute to work. They're one of the few types of measures that the census does for this. But you can see how well aligned the usage of public transit is. People that use public transit to get to work are right along the Broadway corridor line. They're right along the SkyTrain line. How about people that walk to work? Well, this map is very, very revealing. All the people that walk to work live in high-density areas and in the core, and the relationship between density and core are critical to understanding the dynamic of pedestrian activity in the city, and indeed in cities across Canada. All of which, I put these on the table, all of which speak to the need for a very comprehensive way of thinking about how we are going to deal with pedestrianism, cycling, and public transit usage. Because they speak to a very big picture. It's not just about getting people to walk. It's about ensuring that the city is designed in a way that encourages it, ensuring that transit systems are designed in a way to support it, to enable that. Well, that's the pictures I had to show you. I'm going to welcome Mr. Peñalosa to the stage because he's a man who likes to talk about action. So I've told you a little bit about the situation. Mr. Peñalosa is going to tell us how we can amp things up a little bit. Gil Peñalosa comes from a background in the business sector. I think this gives him a very important perspective on dealing with the nature of transportation infrastructure, of sustainability, and of the many overlapping ways that in which these things intersect. In the mid-1990s, the mayor of Bogota, Colombia, appointed him the Commissioner of Parks, Sport, and Recreation for the city. And Gil led his team to design and build over 200 parks, of which the best known is the Simon Bolivar, which is about 360 hectares. Mr. Peñalosa was also the inheritor of a very interesting tradition in Bogota called the Ciclovia, which was started a few years earlier, but which, like the healthy living it had aimed to promote, had actually slowed down a little bit in its usage. Gil turned that around entirely, where it was once an 8-kilometer pedestrian-friendly, cycling-friendly initiative on Sundays. It became, in a few short years under his leadership, a 91-kilometer car-free masterpiece. It is now used by 1.5 million people weekly. But Gil has also come to Canada, where he works for Mississauga's Walk and Bike for Life. He's a successful international speaker. He works with Gale Architects in Denmark. He is also involved with a project for public spaces in New York, and has a wealth of experience. He travels the world, he gives lectures on how to be car-free, but he also picks up good examples from cities and communities around the globe. We are very, very delighted to have him here today, and I would ask you to join me in welcoming him to the stage. Mr. Gil Peñalosa.
Thank you very much. I think I'm very, very happy to be here. Actually, I've been to Vancouver so many times, and every time that I come, within the first half an hour, I say, this is where I should be living. But I don't know why I haven't. Actually, the first time that I came to Vancouver was when I was in my first year of university, and Vancouver was hosting the World Habitat Conference, the first World United Nations Conference on Human Settlements. And by coincidence, our father was Under Secretary General of the UN, and he was the person in charge of the conference. So we have a lot of very close ties to Vancouver, and we feel very proud of having been part of it. And actually that was as some seed well planted on city-related issues, because both my brother and I came over. I was first year at UNC studying political science. He was third year at Duke studying economics. And later on, he became mayor of Bogota, and I became commissioner of Parks and Recreation. So Vancouver planted a city above us about urban issues and urban planning. So it's been exciting. And actually, the other day I was flying in Air Canada and talking about Vancouver. I saw an article written by someone in Vancouver. And in the cover of the En Route magazine, they had an article, do you live in a happy city? Cities are undergoing a radical change with one thing in mind, your well-being. And then actually this article talks a lot about Paris and Bogota, and then it's nice because then I'm also going to tell you today a lot about Paris and Bogota. And one of the things that Charles Montgomery, who is from Vancouver, a freelance writer, and he writes in the Globe and Mail and in many other places, he writes, the more that we meet outside our cars, the kinder and gentler we're likely to become. So these are some of the things that we're going to be talking about. And it's nice that now we see it's becoming fashionable to be cyclists, not only Elle Macpherson, Kate Blanchett, I think these guys are going to I think they're going to need a bigger bike now. Pee-wee, but also we need people to realize that the cyclist is not only about Pee-wee, but it's also about Mr. McDreamy. And Mr. McDreamy, he's a nice dad because, look, he's teaching his daughter how to bike ride. And also, the women now, this is not the image. This is 1950s. In the 21st century, they go cycling with the Louis Vuitton purses. It's fashion. And all of this is good because it creates a nice ambience, And, it's matching bikes and matching, all of this is really good, And even in New York, the models they have, is fantastic. So one thing that is very clear is that we have moved ahead and we're thinking and talking about bicycles and about walkable communities. But we're thinking and talking, but not enough doing. It is really important because a few years ago we were not even talking about it. Now everybody's talking about it, so that's really good. It's a major step forward. But now we got to move further and go into the doing. And because like Albert Einstein says, life is like a bicycle. To keep your balance, you must keep moving. So we got to keep moving. And, and how are we going to move from thinking and talking into doing? One of the things that I want you to think about tonight is what kind of cities are we going to build? That's the main issue. What kind of cities? Because if our model of city is Houston, it's going to be totally different than if it's Copenhagen. So what kind of cities are we going to build? And in order for that, let's take a look a little bit at some of the numbers, because in the last census, the Canadian population is 32 million, and it's going to grow to 39 million. That's 6.5 million. In just 25 years. But if we say, okay, what's 6.5 million? Well, 6.5 million is the population of Toronto, plus Montreal, Calgary, Ottawa, and Edmonton. The complete population of the 5 largest cities in Canada. We're going to build those cities in the next 25 years. 6.5 million people, when we start thinking about how much is that, it's 11 times the population of Vancouver. Wouldn't it be wonderful if those 11 times were as nice as Vancouver? Unfortunately, when you take a look around the country, most of the growth is not as nice as we wish it was. And it's like building 1.5 times the population of BC. So in 25 years, 25 years, that's nothing. When you look forward, 25 years seems like a long time. But if you really want to realize how much 25 years is, look a little bit back, and you'll realize that 25 is not a long time. So not only must we improve the cities that we have today, but we must also build great cities for 6.5 million additional people. When we think about Vancouver, the greater Vancouver today has 2.2 million, and BC has around 4.1 million. In 25 years, by 2031, this is going to grow by 40%. It's going to be 40% in just 25 years. So the issue is, if we had a magic wand and we could redo 40% of Vancouver, even the best parts of Vancouver, we would do it even better. Well, that's the opportunity that we have over the next 25 years. We're going to be building cities in the greater Vancouver for over 1 million people in the next 25 years. So how are we going to do it? This presents a wonderful and unique challenge, but it also presents a fantastic opportunity because never before, and probably never after, are we going to build so many cities for so many people in such a short period of time. So what kind of cities are we going to build? So the question that I want you to think tonight is, how do we want to live? How do we want to live? Because at the end of the day, a city is only a means to a way of life. If we find that our model city is Houston, it's going to be totally different than if our model city is Copenhagen. So how do we want to live? Do we want our kids to walk to school? Do we want people to be able to walk through their daily uses to their services, to the grocery store, to the drugstore, to the movies, to visit friends, or do we want people to drive everywhere? So how do we want to live? Once we decide how do we want to live, then everything else starts falling into place. Because when you define your city around cars, all you get is more cars. And then you got to invite your friends to help you cross the street. There are many cities that are growing with roads that are 60 meters wide, and the population is getting older, and it's harder to cross. So this is becoming a reality. So I saw this cartoon that I thought it's interesting. It's the only overpass we've ever built that actually reduces traffic. You build more highways, you get more cars, and so on. But when you define your city around people, you get more people, and healthier and happier people. And you also get healthier communities and better quality of life. And better quality of life for all. And at the end of the day, people start saying, oh, Gil, but haven't you realized that now there are economic problems? How can we even talk about quality of life? The economy is not doing very well, so we got to focus on the economy, not on quality of life. Well, the reality is that quality of life is the most important factor in the 21st century of economic competitiveness. In the 21st century, in the 19th century, what created wealth and power in the cities was land. And then actually you could take over the next door neighbor and whatever. But in the 20th century, it was capital. So the cities were subsidizing companies to move one place or another. But in the 21st century, it's people. In an ever more globalized world, the best people, whether they are the best engineers or the best artists or the best carpenters or the best medical doctors, they can live anywhere in the world. So why would they live in Vancouver and not in Copenhagen or New York or Paris or whatever? So creating a fantastic greater Vancouver is about economic competitiveness, because we have to attract and retain the most educated and the most qualified people and the most creative. Some cities are attracting through high salaries, and then people go and work 2 or 3 years and then they leave. So I think something that is already great in Vancouver is that it's attracting a lot of really good people. But that is, if Vancouver wants to stay as one of the leading cities in the world, I think it's very, very important to continue improving the city in order to attract and retain. Because a good city is not a matter of engineering. Actually, it's much more akin to art. So I want to thank the Canadian Urban Transit Association, CURA, as well as the Simon Fraser University, the City Program. And Gord, thank you very much for the kind words. The Vancouver Public Space Network, TransLink, and the City of Vancouver for the possibility. And actually, as you can see, I changed a little bit the title because here they said Lessons from Bogota and Beyond. And I thought that it was a little bit pushy to come to Vancouver giving lessons from Bogota. So I'm going to share experiences because Vancouver, actually, wherever I go around the world, I always have Vancouver as one of the cities that people should try to aspire to be. So it's, and this, I go all over and I show some of the things. And I say, it's wonderful how in Vancouver, city staff and politicians and citizens have gotten together, did not allow highways into the city center. And like one of the the former co-directors of planning, Anne McAfee, said, we have learned that building livable cities is part art and part science. And then how Vancouver chose a way, and it's becoming more pedestrian friendly, and is having more community engagement, and the Vancouver 2020 plans involved a whole bunch of people, and you're doing some really nice boulevards and trying to link cycling and transit, and it was a challenge when they told me, you want to do some presentation, a public meeting in Vancouver, and I said, wow, what am I going to say? But the reality is that you have a wonderful city, but not all of it is as wonderful. There are some fantastic places, but the other thing is that, even if you have done some really good things, such as, for example, this road, then you got the bikes and you got the pedestrians, and when these 2 rows of trees grow in a few years, it's going to be fantastic. But nevertheless, creating great cities is a process of continuous improvement, And the good news is that especially the city center of Vancouver is quite nice. The bad news is that you are never finished. So you gotta continue and going on and on and on. And actually, from the cycling point of view, although Andrew just said that Vancouver was awarded the best pedestrian city in 2008, cycling is not really that good. And actually, sometimes the accountants, they say that there's the acid test to see if the financial things fit. Well, when we're talking about cycling issues, I also have an acid test. The acid test is, would you send an 80-year-old on that bikeway? If you would, it's safe enough. If you would not, it's not good enough. So this is what when we have a city where anybody of any age, an 8-year-old or an 80-year-old, can bike around the city, then it will be good enough. Vancouver has to decide where does it want to play, Is it want to play with the big one or with the little ones? Because there is no doubt that Vancouver is one of the best cities all over the world. But is it going to stay? And in North America, from the pedestrian and cycling point of view, in North America is already one of the leaders. Even with only 3% that we just saw, 3% cyclists in Vancouver and 1% in the extended Vancouver, that's pretty good for Canada, which is pretty bad at the end of the day, but it's pretty good for Canada. So you got to decide, you're going to be the leaders of the little leagues, or are you going to play with the big boys? So are we going to, that's a decision that Vancouver really has to say from the cycling point of view, for example. Is it going to be happy being the best of the worst, or does it want to be in the world championships? So, and I'm really selfish when I say that I wish all the luck to Vancouver, because if Vancouver becomes one of the best cycling cities, we won't have to tell people, see what Copenhagen is doing, see what Amsterdam is doing, see what these others are doing. But we say, go see Vancouver. North America used to be car-oriented. It became a great pedestrian city, and now it's a great cycling city. So when I say, that we wish you success, it's also from a very selfish point of view, because it would be fantastic for all of North America to have a really nice example of a cycling-friendly city in North America. So I want to talk a little bit about beyond the baby steps, but I think that before, now that we are focused in Vancouver, I want to show you a short video, 9-minute video that we did about Copenhagen and Amsterdam. And actually we did this video not so much thinking on the North American market, but we were thinking on the developing countries, because when we're promoting more walkable and bikeable cities in the developing countries, people say, so you want us to be poor forever? You don't want us to be developed and rich and have cars like the North American cities? So we had to go and do a short video, and we've taken it to hundreds and hundreds of schools to show the kids that some of the best cities in the world actually are the cities that are most walkable and most bikeable. So this is a 9-minute video, and when you take a look at it, try to see, what could Vancouver learn from this? What could be done to improve not only bikeability, but in many other ways, public spaces?
Well, we are in Holland at this moment. It's Amsterdam. I'm living here, and my name is Eva. And this street is very special because there are no cars allowed, and so the children can play here very easily, playing on the streets with their bikes, with the balls, all around. It's very lovely.
So if you come to a city where many people are standing and sitting and relaxing and playing, that's because it's a nice place, because they would not start to do all this if it wasn't comfortable and nice.
People-oriented cities offer public spaces which are friendly to everybody. They give priority to people rather than to automobiles.
city was always the meeting place of people, the place where you could meet your society, your fellow citizens, and you could move about without paying and without being invited. You can move about and see what's going on and see the girls or the boys or whatever you're looking after. And that's one of the major interests of people. That is other people. And a people-oriented city offers that attraction, the other people.
Copenhagen, capital of Denmark, is an example of a people-oriented city. In the past 40 years, Copenhagen has transformed its public spaces. Step by step, Copenhagen has closed to car traffic its main central streets and vital places at the historical downtown. At the same time, the city has ensured an adequate infrastructure for a widespread use of bicycles.
There's very good quality about Copenhagen, about a city where you can be if you don't have a car. It's not on the premises of the car, but on the premises of the pedestrians and the bicyclists.
And in Copenhagen we can see that every year there are more and more people who bicycle to work and also to other things.
Denmark is a country with extremely cold and long winters. Nevertheless, in Copenhagen, 1 out of every 3 persons uses a bicycle to go to everyday activities.
Normally when I get up and I have to go to work or to school, I take my bike and drive to school on my bike. Because that's the easiest way, the cheapest way and the fastest way. Because the infrastructure is in Copenhagen made for bicycles and have been made that way. I've been that way for many years.
And now we have a citywide system, so it's a transport system. It goes from one door to the other throughout the city. You can really bike.
In a country where the average wealth per person is higher than in the United States, many citizens have chosen a bicycle as a means of transportation because they live better that way. In Amsterdam, capital of the Netherlands, bicycles are also a part of everyday life. During the 70s, authorities in Amsterdam and many other cities in the Netherlands decided to solve the problem of traffic congestion by fostering the use of bicycles. Nowadays, the Netherlands is the country with the largest concentration of bicycles in the world. In the Netherlands, a bicycle is a must. It is a transportation system and a way of living.
But what you can do in the Netherlands is cycle around, walk around, ride around, train around, and see the variety of situations. And be surprised by the variety of people who are cycling, young, old, everybody does it.
It doesn't matter if you are a director of a school or just working at a laboratory or whatever you do. People can choose for a bicycle and they do. So it doesn't depend on the status of your job.
So we are a motorized country, we are a modern country, but we do use the bike.
Despite the high level of economic development in the Netherlands, Dutch people have chosen the bicycle as their favorite vehicle.
I live here in the neighborhood, so it's 5 minutes by bike and then I'm in the center, so I never use my car here in the city.
A bicycle is the ideal vehicle to move within the city. Over a flat terrain, an average person rides 7 kilometers in half an hour.
Well, basically, as I'm a student, I do everything on my bike. I go to the shops, I go to school, I go out to the pub at night, and everything I do on bicycle.
I go to my work on my bike every day.
Where do I go on my bike? to school, to do some groceries as we just did, to go to friends.
When I go out, I go by bike. When I go to the train, I go by bike.
Yeah, it's very safe.
En ja, wij vinden het gezond op de fiets.
The oxygen in the air, you know, it feels good.
Cycling is good for your health, and it's amazing how much you see in the nature. It's so nice. You feel so good.
At early age, kids are taught at school the basic safety skills to deal with different traffic situations while cycling.
In 3 weeks we learn the kids how to react in traffic, how to behave, how to keep distance, and how to do the traffic, how to read the traffic signs. And that's what you see here.
Bicycle culture in the Netherlands grew based on citywide urban infrastructure, which has been specifically designed to protect cyclists wherever they go. A wide net of safe cycle paths allows you to reach the most important places in a city. Cyclists have adequate parking places. Bicycles are given special priority at the crossing points of cycle paths and roads. Sometimes, bridges and tunnels are built for the exclusive use of pedestrians and cyclists. Additionally, different measures are taken to reduce the speed of car traffic and discourage car use.
The dominancy of the car has been taken away in the last 20-30 years by bringing the speed down, so no dangerous situation, easy crossings, rising the parking taxes, a variety of measures, so that no car dominance. The car is not the champion, the car is just one of them, and it gives simply a better feeling for everybody.
Examples as Houten show that it's an integrated way of planning public space in relation to cycle networks.
In Houten's everyday life, you can experience the environment and mobility of a city specifically designed for bicycles.
What they did in Houten is take the car out, so there is no through traffic through the center areas and the residential areas. You can go everywhere by car. Each house, each building can be reached by car, but you have to go around. It's never direct. But the pedestrians and the cyclists, they can go direct.
A bicycle, adequately integrated to urban planning as a transportation system, offers many benefits to a city. It's cheap, efficient, uses little space, makes no noise, and it doesn't pollute. Mobility on a bicycle stands as an expression of freedom.
Okay. So I think that there are a lot of nice images of things that we could do. One of the things that is interesting is that everything that we're going to talk about is nothing of this is rocket science. You know, people go, oh yeah, that's right. Well, it might be rocket science is to actually do it. But, you know, nothing that we're going to see people can have an excuse that they don't have the money or that, no. All of this is totally doable. And basically I want to talk a little bit about why we are facing a perfect storm, but how can we transform a perfect storm into a perfect opportunity and go beyond the baby steps. So we just did the introduction. I want to talk why a perfect storm, why a perfect opportunity, and what beyond baby steps looks like, and then how to move from talking to doing. And then we're going to have plenty of time for questions and comments afterwards. So why is it a perfect storm? You know, one of the things that with Walk and Bike for Life, which is a not-profit based in Canada, we've been reaching is, you know, we've been thinking, you know, if 20 years ago we would have thought, what were the ideal conditions to promote more walkable and bikeable communities? Everything is taking place now, you know. Then we say, but why is it that things are not happening? And sometimes we meet with people, especially bicycle enthusiasts or pedestrians, and we just, amongst each other, we just say, oh, you know, the politicians are so dumb that they just don't get it. And then I say, no, maybe we are the ones that are dumb. Because if it's so obvious, if it's so clear that things should move that way, maybe we have not done a good enough job at selling the idea, you know. And one of the things is that sometimes we just say, we got to have better cycling infrastructure. Why? Oh, because it's obvious. No. So we got to come with different arguments. And we came up with the acronym EARTH. And we said, you know, walking and cycling and parks and trails improve the earth, the environment, the economic activity, recreation, transportation, and public health. And I'm going to go briefly on each one of these because I think that we're going to have different arguments for different people. Sometimes we meet a counselor, and that counselor couldn't really care much about transportation, but is really focused on public health. So we got to have the arguments why walking and cycling is good for public health. And maybe someone else doesn't care as much about public health, but it's about economic development. And someone else is about recreation. And so we got to have different arguments for different people because these activities are good for many activities. So we have to improve at the way that we promote these activities. Because, you know, if we are not able to sell and to promote and to develop better communities, with all of this taking place, then we will become a failure, you know. And it's so it's a perfect opportunity. And when I say baby steps, it's because many times I go all over North America, and I find that people have been promoting a bike lane. And then after years of promoting a bike, finally they get their bike lane on an arterial. And then they were having 100 cyclists, and now they go to 150, when they thought they were going to get 1,000. You know, and then they're happy because they got that bike. When there should not have been a bike lane on an arterial, there should have been a separate facility. So it's not about baby steps. We got to take major leaps. For so many years, we've been investing in cars, that if we want to make a dent, if we're going to make a difference, it cannot be with baby steps or with major leaps. So we're going to talk about that. From the point of view of the environment, actually, when Al Gore did his movie, it was really good because we got to remember, only a few years ago, people were still saying that global warming didn't exist, that it was something made up by the leftist scientists and whatever. But now, part of the movie and part of many other things, there's a general agreement that one, global warming is a reality. Two, that the oil is going to be more and more expensive, and maybe that might also get people out of their cars. And also, you know, we got to find, if we're going to transfer a group of 60 people from one place, we can either have these people walking or taking 60 cars or taking one bus or cycling. So there is no doubt that even if the gas was free tomorrow, pedestrians, cyclists, and buses, they take up a lot less space than cars. So it's not only the issue about gas, but also that, you know. And now that the gas is becoming very expensive, I saw this the other day on a Latin American paper that it says, don't even think of touching my food, you know. And we thought that it was a nice idea to have gas, but, you know, it's not becoming such a good idea. Like someone said, while many are worrying about filling their gas tanks, others around the world are struggling to fill their stomachs. And it is getting more and more difficult every day. And that wasn't Fidel Castro saying it, but it was the president of the World Bank. So this is something that is really dramatic all across. You know, this doesn't have any political parties. And walking and cycling and the environment is making a major impact on how do we recycle tires, how do we recycle cars, and what are we going to do with all of this. And like the energy used in private cars, if we take a look at here some of the cities, And the energy is used in private cars. Here's Atlanta at the bottom. And then we take a look at walking and cycling, the daily trips. But you don't have to remember the previous chart because now we got it. So there is a very clear link how some of these things are matching, you know. The other day, you know, I was in front of a Tim Hortons, 23 degrees, blue sky, whatever, and everybody going through the drive-thrus, you know. So why is it that we have all of these bylaws, anti-idling, and then you have a bylaw anti-idling, but at the same time, people wait in line for 20 minutes to get a coffee? It's, you know, and then in the earth, the second was, the A was activity, economic activity, you know. For example, because some of these things, we got to show why walking and cycling is so good for economic activity. The other day was in Minneapolis, and I saw they have a fantastic trail system connecting the chain of lakes and the city center. And I asked someone, I said, okay, how much do these trails make for the city? And they said, oh, no, they don't make any money. Because, you know, we don't charge anybody for using them. So I said, okay, you know, how many people uses the trails? And they said about 14.5 million people came last year. And I said, well, if it's 14.5 million, just think, if each one of those had a soft drink and a hot dog, $4, that would be $58 million. And they got a 10% sales tax. So they could get $5.8 million just from the sales tax. And what happens if 10% of them stayed overnight? So when Vancouver is investing in beautiful waterfronts and pedestrian places and cycling and whatever, this is the best business for anybody. Besides, you know, what really gives character to any city and what is really memorable is pedestrian and cycling places, you know. I've never seen anybody going to Paris and then coming back and talking about how wonderful their highways are. What people do, they go to Paris or whatever, and they walk, and then they have a cappuccino, and then they walk a little more, and then they have a glass of wine. And, you know, cities like London, Paris, or New York, they make about $15 billion a year in tourism. But Vancouver is really good in tourism, so I'm going to go to the next one, because walking and cycling is also good recreation for all, you know. There is a very clear trend in Canada. From Halifax to Vancouver, people are moving away from organized activities into non-organized and unscheduled, except for soccer. But the number one physical activity by far is walking, and cycling is always in the top 5. And, you know, these are some of the things, you know, whether it's up in the mountains or walking their dogs, and some people are more adventurous, you know. That's also a kind of cycling. But also walking is good for everybody, you know, regardless of the age or the gender or the ethnicity or any other condition. And that's really, really important in an age where community centers each time are charging more user fees and whatever. And this is really good in any kind of weather. Obviously, in Vancouver, you don't have so much of this, but nevertheless, up in the mountains. But let's go to transportation, because from the point of view of the T of the earth, the T is transportation. We see a lot more people driving to the gyms to walk on the treadmills. And then, and there are more problematic symptoms, you know, such as this. Can you imagine people going 24-hour fitness? Those are the kind of things, you know. And we got to remember that walking is a mode of transportation. Well, and this is very, very important. And I really like, and I use as an example that in Vancouver's Transportation Master Plan, the number one objective is pedestrians first. And it would be great if every city, not only Vancouver, but in the greater Vancouver and all of BC, every city had pedestrian as pedestrian number one. Because also sometimes you go to places and people say, in some of the neighborhoods of the extended Vancouver, people say, oh, don't even talk about walking or cycling because here everybody drives. No, not everybody drives, you know. This is almost like a human right, you know. Even in the wealthiest and most sprawled neighborhoods, at least a third of the people do not drive, you know. Everyone under 17, about 30% of the over 60, and 50% of the 18 through 60. So when we are saying that we want safe pedestrian and cycling facilities, it cannot be an afterthought. And if the place is not as sprawled as wealthy, but is less sprawled, more dense, and not as wealthy, then it's not a third, but it might be half, or 60, or 70, or 80%. So having proper pedestrian and cycling facilities is really almost an issue of human rights. And also walking and cycling is the best link to any transit system. And this is something that we got to work. This is a municipality in Ontario where they are promoting that people should be using transit. But how are people, do you really think that people are going to get out of their cars and take the bus when those are the bus stops? This is a school in that same municipality. They got 1,500 students in this secondary school, and this is the bus stop for 1,500 students. It doesn't make a lot of sense. So then the other day I showed them this bus shelter. So they said, Gil, why bother even showing us this? I said, because maybe that's what the bus stop would look like if the decision makers use the bus service. And we really got to get the decision makers using it. But this is really some of the best links, and we're going to show some examples in a little while. And also we got to develop complete streets. Complete streets are those that are designed, built, maintained, and operated, thinking of pedestrians, cyclists, transit, and motor vehicles, in that order. Let me give you a few examples. This is in Washington State. This is obviously a street that was built incomplete. And then afterwards, they got to complete it. But it's much more expensive to complete it afterwards. Look at this. They got money for the road, but they forget about the sidewalk. So this is got to be about all users. When we're thinking that we're going to build communities for over 1 million additional people in the greater Vancouver in the next 25 years, these are the kind of things that we got to think. Look, there's a bus stop here. So this is before and after. Those are the kind of things, that we really have to improve, and it doesn't cost a lot of money. This is Palo Alto, California. Look, there's a high school here, and when they build the road, 3 lanes each way, there's not a crosswalk. There is no facilities for bikes, for pedestrians, signage. The pedestrians and the cyclists become like an afterthought. When to do it right from the beginning, the cost would have been just marginal. So those are the kind of things. And this is health. So is this what our future looks like, What about our personal and public, the quality of life? So these are some of the arguments that we got to come. This is the earth, and then the H is public health. Because, the reality is that the lack of physical activity has many, many, many problems. Many problems. And then I'm working with the World Health Organization in the Caribbean, because one of the things that we find, you see the Caribbean women, how the rates of obesity are increasing so much. But so is Canada is increasing, the US is increasing. And then a major reason is because people are not physically active. And the easiest way to be physically active is to be able to walk and bike as a normal part of everyday life. Look at these obesity trends in the US. In 1985, all of this, we got on 95, and now we got states that are over 15%. 2000, over 20%. 2005, some states over 30%. And we say, okay, that's the US. Okay, but look at Canada. In 80, we're not as bad as the US, but nevertheless, the trend is very clear where we're going. This is 1985, where not one of the provinces had more than the second bracket of the 10%. And this is 1990, 94, 98, 2000, 2002. So things are getting worse, very clearly. And that the cost is billions of dollars into the public. There is no public health system in the world that can survive being just curative. The focus has to be on prevention. And look at this. It's very clear also that the lack of physical activity has the most influence in any diseases. This is what the physical activity, this is about in the 1700s. People used to be physically active basically for work, a little bit domestic, a little bit transportation, and very little recreational. And this has been over time, and now this is today, right here. So then it's physical activity for work is a lot less, and then domestic. And this is, the developing nations are a little bit further back today, but further back, while this is North America at the end. So we see that more physical activities, recreational, a lot less transportation, domestic, and work. And daily trips of walking and cycling has a major impact on obesity. So you say, why are you talking about obesity and physical activity and this? Because this can be a major ally promoting pedestrian and cycling facilities. Because look at this. The green line is the percentage of people that are walking, cycling, or taking transit. The red line is the percentage of obesity. So there is a very clear link on these issues. And the model of travel in urban areas, this is the Netherlands, Germany, and England, where we see bicycle 30, 12, 8, and walking also. And then this is Canada and the US. So, and why are they any better than what we are? Look at those obesity rates are skyrocketing, and the publications about obesity are skyrocketing. But nevertheless, I don't have this graph for Canada, but for the US, look, the physical activity has been totally stable in the last 15 years. So we're doing a lot more riding, but not more activity. So maybe we're going to be more aggressive like the British that came. The British Heart Foundation are making all kinds of suggestions how people can be more physically active. Get your 30 minutes a day. Anyway, because whatever we're doing is not working. So it is very clear that there is a perfect storm, but is this also a perfect opportunity? Why can't this be a perfect opportunity? It can be a perfect opportunity because the stars are aligned. The stars are aligned. Unfortunately, if 20 years ago we would have thought, what is the ideal condition? Everything we just seen, everything is taking place. So how can we take all of that, all those elements, and translate those into actions? We really gotta reposition walking and cycling. That is something that is discretionary, something that is not essential. Most of the cities say, okay, if we have money left over after the essential services, then we'll put money into that. No, they got people, municipalities and regions and provinces got to start thinking of this non-motorized transportation as something that is perceived to alleviate their political concerns of the policymakers. It has to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. So let me tell you about two myths, because sometimes people say, oh, Gil, walking and cycling are not safe. And then I asked them, if a plane skidded off a runway every week in Canada, and 258 passengers were injured and 7 died, one plane last week, one plane this week, another next week, something would be done about it. Well, that's what happens in Canada. Every week, 258 pedestrians are injured and 7 are killed. Every week. In the US, every year more pedestrians are killed than all the people that have died in Iraq, all the Americans that have died in Iraq since the war started. In Canada, take a look at this. The pedestrians. There are twice as many pedestrians killed as homicides by firearm. And actually, some people tell me, you see, Gil, that's why I don't walk and I don't bike, because it's too dangerous. And then I said, you remind me of a friend that he went home and he found that his wife was on the sofa with another guy. So he sold the sofa. But there is no need to sell the couch. Because the problem is not the activity. The problem is the facility. Let's look at Europe. It's very clear how in Europe people are walking and cycling a lot more, and they have far fewer deaths. And if we include both walking and cycling, the other one was about, then the trend is the same, of far fewer deaths. So the issue is, how are we going to get proper facilities? And there is also a myth that car-friendly cities will not change. But the reality, let's look at Portland. Portland has many similarities to Vancouver. This was 1990. The black lines were the bike paths, and these were the mode split. All of a sudden, they made a major campaign, bicycles everywhere, and they created a whole bunch of bikeways, and look how it increased in just 10 years. Boulder, Colorado. Boulder, they did the same thing. And look, it went from 1 in 10 people biking to work to more than 1 in 5, more than double. In Berlin, they built 860 kilometers of separate bike paths. separate so that the cars have their own area, the cyclists, the pedestrians, and they went from less than 1% to over 10%. But then let's make also from the point of view of a really nice opportunity, we got to involve public health. One of the things that I find that is taking place all across North America, both the US and Canada, is that some of the best partners to promote walkable and cyclable communities is public health. Because then when you walk in with public health, you're talking about life and death. Some people listen. So bring always the medical officer with you. And it makes a lot of sense, and actually making walkable and bikeable communities is very interesting because, for many, many years, people thought that they had to do a lot of exercise. But then someone did a study and realized this is the levels of physical activity, that just by increasing a little bit the physical activity, the benefits were tremendous. And then all of a sudden, people thought it was just one crazy study. But there have been now a bunch of studies that have shown that with a little bit of physical activity, all of a sudden, the level of fitness, it doesn't have to be really high. The major improvements are with the first initial activity. Look, these are the health benefits, and this is the level of physical activity. So when someone that is totally inactive becomes a little bit active, all of a sudden the health benefits are amazing. You don't really have to become a marathon runner. And actually 3 years ago I was in Vancouver running the Vancouver Marathon. I hadn't seen this graph, otherwise I would have run the 10K and not the 42K. I thought I had to do the whole thing too. So it's very interesting because very recently everybody was saying no pain, no gain. But now it is 30 minutes of moderate physical activity a day brings all the health benefits. So this has a major impact, whether people are going to walk to buy the milk or the eggs or walk to school or walk to work. And then also from the point of view of transportation. In transportation, we got to also have some principles, some clarity on some principles. One is that pedestrians first. Bicyclists second, transit third, and then cars. Because from the point of view, who's the most vulnerable people when you are in transportation? The most vulnerable are the pedestrians. Thank God you don't have a lot of snow, but where I live in Toronto, whenever there is snow, this should be the priority. But actually it's upside down, it's the other way around. All the municipalities in the GTA have money to clean the snow for the cars, and then for transit, and usually they don't have any money for bicycles and pedestrians. So they say, oh no, each house should clean their own. Why don't they tell that each house should also plow the snow of the roads? We really got to have clear the priorities. And I want to show you this because this is very, very important as Vancouver needs to build a really nice bicycle infrastructure. This is from Portland. When Portland did, and Portland has probably the best bike lane infrastructure in North America. When they started building all of these bike lanes, bicycle increased. And then we said, wow, this is fantastic. And then it leveled off. Portland is at about 5%, even though it has the best bike lane infrastructure. And when it leveled off, they said, oh, what's going on? How come people are not cycling? And one of the things that they found out is that the people that are cycling in Portland are 20 to 50 year olds. Second, mostly men. So they realized that there are very few children, very few older adults, and much fewer women than men. And when they started doing the interviews, they found this. They found first that there is a 1% here that I say they're the kamikaze cyclists. They don't need anything. Probably in this room there are a lot of kamikaze cyclists that without a bike lane, without signage, without anything, we go out and bike anywhere in any city. But that's only 1%. So are we going to build facilities for that 1%? Then they found also that there's about a third of the population that will not bike. No way, no how, it doesn't matter. You can build the best facilities. So then this is the other two possibilities. One is this green here, which is people that are enthusiastic and confident that if you build some kind of facility, they will try to use it, such as bike lanes or whatever. But the biggest chunk of the market is people that are interested but concerned. People that are not comfortable in traffic, that prefer low volume, low speed, neighborhood streets, separate facilities from the car. So who do we want cycling in Vancouver? We got to keep this in mind. So we need safe bicycling for all. And one of the things we need safe cycling if we want to have more children, if we're going to have more women, if we want to have more seniors, because that's the population that we have to target. It's not the 1% of the kamikazes. We're going to create a wonderful bicycle city for everyone. And the reality is that the pedestrians move at around 5K per hour. And the bicyclists around 15 or 20K per hour. And the cars at more than 14K per hour. So in anywhere where the cars are going to go at more than 14K per hour, we need separate facilities for each. You know, like, for example, in Denmark, there is a rule of thumb. Any street that has more than 6,000 cars per day, or that the speed is more than 40K per hour, has to have separate facilities. Because otherwise, if you mix pedestrians and cyclists, the pedestrians are going to get injured. If you mix cyclists and cars, then the cyclists are going to get injured. So you need safe facilities. You know, there's someone that said, there are times that I ride in Austin and I'm afraid of cars. Imagine what the beginner cyclist must feel like. And the guy riding in Austin, you probably have heard of him, Lance Armstrong, 7-time winner. You know, the reality is when you paint lines on the road, you know, it's very inexpensive. People get a brush and they paint the line. And this is what happens. You know, the cars, they don't respect the lines, you know. People think that they can park. In some other places, they do some really kamikaze bike lanes, such as this one. Look at this. The cars are going one way, the buses are going the other, and the cyclists in the middle. And then that city says that they are building facilities. Obviously, that's them. You know, but everywhere, you know, this is Paris. Paris is building a lot of really nice facilities now, but some of them are still like this. And then people got to go around the car, and then they open the door, and then the cyclist is killed, you know. It's day after day. The other day in Toronto, they find a car, $185. Someone that opened the door, and a cyclist hit, was bumping to a truck that was coming by, and the cyclist was killed. 40-year-old, 2 kids, wife, and the car owner, $185. That's the fine. It's crazy, you know, and it's day after day. So no wonder people are afraid of riding their bikes when there is a bike lane. And the reality also is that if the only thing that separates you from an SUV is a painted line, you're going to go on the sidewalk. And if you go on the sidewalk, then the pedestrians are going to be injured. And the pedestrians and cyclists must be the best friends. The best friends. Because both are non-motorized, both develop community, both, you know, when you are either walking or cycling, you see people, and you see people eye to eye, and you develop this human interaction. But so instead of fighting, we don't want to have bicycle parking on the sidewalks where the pedestrians are bothered. And we don't want to be riding on the sidewalk where you create conflict. The pedestrians and the cyclists must be united and must be friends, because then they have to get spaces from the cars. So you need some kind of physical separation. Obviously, this is the minimum separation that you should have. But in other places, such as this one in Ottawa, they're improving in many, many cities. Look at in Melbourne. In Melbourne, they used to have these bike lanes, and people were not using it. So now they are creating the same bike lane, but they are putting physical separation. And people say, okay, you know, what happens with the water when it rains and the sewer? Okay, so then they don't put it next to each other so that the water can run to the existing sewage system. But then the cyclists feel safe because the cars are not allowed to go in. And also the cars feel safe because the cyclists are not running all over the road too. So it's a win-win for everybody, you know. So this is taking place all over Melbourne. This is others that are separate. This is New York and along the Hudson River. And these are the kind of things that we need. We really need facilities where we have the sidewalk for the pedestrians, the bicycle path for the cyclists, then the cars. Each one needs their own space in order to have safety. You know, there is no city in the world where you got more than 10% cyclists where they don't have separate facilities. This is Copenhagen last year. When I took this picture, there was a road of 2 lanes, and they were taking away 1 lane from cars and making a cycle path on each side. You know, there is no magic. Sometimes people say, oh, you know, where are we going to put it? Okay, you got to make a political decision. You got to either take it away from the pedestrian or take it away from the car. But you got 1 building here, 1 building there. That's all the space that you have. So how are you going to do it? So then people feel safe because then they have a physical separation. You got the roads, then about 5 centimeters high, you got the cycle track, and another 5 centimeters, you got the pedestrians. And then people feel safe in the summer, in the winter, in the daytime, at nighttime, at any time. So those are the kind of things that we need in Vancouver. This is the Commissioner of Planning and the Commissioner of Transportation of New York. They came over. Part of my work I do in Denmark with Gale Architects. I'm a senior consultant for Gale. And we invited Amanda and Janet, and they spent a couple of days in Copenhagen, and they rode their bikes, and they saw what it was about. And when the Commissioner of Transportation came back to New York, the first thing she did, they came up with this plan. This is in September of last year. And she said that it represents the kinds of innovative ideas they want to explore in New York, where they would have the pedestrians, the cyclists, a physical separation, and then the cars. Okay? But this is talking and doing. 30 days later, she had 9th Avenue. 9th Avenue in New York, she had transformed into this, where some of the side streets of low traffic, low speeds were like this, but 9th Avenue, they created not only this is the typical bike lane, but they created a buffer zone, and they put these bollards. So that eventually they're building concrete and putting plants and whatever. But in 30 days, you cannot put the concrete and things. But you got to start. You got to do it. And 9th Avenue was full of cars. Don't think that it was because the 9th Avenue was empty, so they didn't know what to do, so they brought it. No, it was full of cars. And look at that. This is something else that they're starting to do in New York. In some of the areas where there are a lot of tourists, the tourists are window shopping, so they walk very slow. So they're creating this kind of highways for the pedestrians. So if you want to walk slow, you walk here. If you want to walk fast, you walk here. So then there are no fight between the slow and the fast walkers. Look at this, what I was showing you. You see, then first they started putting the bollards. Now they're putting plants. So the bikes in one, the pedestrians on the other. These are the kind. And this is happening this week in New York. I took these photos last week. Broadway Avenue. If anybody has been to all of you that have been to New York, you have seen that Broadway is packed with cars. But nevertheless, what Janet is doing, the commissioner, it takes a lot of guts. This is led by the Commissioner of Transportation of the city. And she's building these bikeways, and then she's created a major buffer zone. Look, this is how it was. This is some of the roads that they had not done yet. They're probably doing it this week or the next week. But this is what it looked like. Look at that. And then the cars, you see this bike lane? This is crazy. The taxis go in, the cars go in, everybody. And then obviously it's not safe. So when it's not safe, and then a lot of people are dead. And when people are killed in New York, they paint a white bicycle. And I think that the best recognition for these cyclists that have been killed is to do safe facilities. This is on Broadway. And look what they're doing on Broadway. Isn't this fantastic? Because they don't want to have just the kamikazes. They already have the 1% of kamikaze cyclists. But they want to go into the bigger share of people cycling. So let's go now into the phase of what these baby steps look like. Because we got to go beyond the baby steps. One of the things I want to talk about is the ciclovia. The ciclovia is something that we did in Bogota, and now it's taking off in many, many cities, and it would be fantastic to do it in many of the municipalities in BC. Basically, the ciclovia is really simple. It's something that is like a gigantic park, but it's paved, that every Sunday and holiday from 7 a.m. till 2 p.m., it is closed. So we open the streets to the people. We open the streets for people to walk and bike and skate, and we close it to the cars. And then the nice thing about it is that you have the existing infrastructure. You don't have to invest. You don't have to build arenas. You don't have to build gymnasiums. It's right there. So there are no capital cost, but you do need operational cost and political will. When I became commissioner, we only had 13K, and we increased in 2 years to over 91K. But what is really more important than that is that we not only increased to 91K, but we increased from around 100,000 people per Sunday to over 1.5 million. And now every Sunday of the year and every holiday, you got over 1.5 million people in a city of about 7 million. But since we knew that not everybody wanted to walk or bike or skate, Then along the route, we set up aerobics places, and then we also really, really nice. Look at all of these parks. We started with one. You know, when you do things in the public spaces, start with one or two on a trial basis. You got to treat these activities as a kite. You put out a kite. If it takes off, and then you give it more string, and then the kite flies longer. If it doesn't, okay, you bring it up and you put another kite. But the aerobics took off. We started with one station. Now we got like 11. And actually, one day a year, we put everybody in a gigantic park, and we beat the world record, the Guinness World Record. The night before, we had Gloria Stefan doing a concert, and we rented the stage and the sound for the Saturday night concert and for the Sunday aerobics. Can you imagine how fantastic? 53,000 people doing aerobics at the same time? With like 25 instructors. It was wonderful. And then this also helped because in Bogota, one day a year we celebrate the car-free day in February, and there are no cars allowed. A city of 7 million people, and there are no cars. This is something that would be fantastic for any municipality anywhere in the world, because more than anything, it's an educational process. You know, even 2 or 3 weeks before the day, even the people that hate it, they start talking about it. You know, they say, that car-free day is coming up. What are you going to do? Are you going to go to work, or are you not going to go to work? Are you going to take your kids to school, or are they not going to go to school? So you get into people's homes, you get into people's offices, you get into and everybody starts talking about the role of the car and the pedestrian and the city and how the cities are built. And like in the elementary schools, the kids do drawing. What does a city look like without cars? In the high schools or universities, they do research papers. So more than anything, it's a fantastic educational tool. And actually the first year, a lot of the car owners, very powerful, they complained a lot. So then there was a referendum. And the referendum it was approved by overwhelming majority that people wanted to have one day a year, a car-free day. So now if any mayor wants to take it away, they got to do it by referendum, because whatever is approved by referendum can only be taken off by referendum. But I would strongly recommend that car-free day is not just a few streets in the city, but maybe to promote it as a city-wide car-free day. Brussels does it one day a year on a Sunday. This in Bogota is on a Thursday. But in any case, even if it's on a Sunday, it's a good process. One of the very interesting things is that the low-income citizens were so amazed to see that car owners could be made to leave their cars and use public transport or walk or bike. And actually talking about car-free Sundays in Guadalajara, we set up in Guadalajara. You know, when I went to Guadalajara to advise the mayor, the biggest recreational activity in Guadalajara was a half marathon. 3,000 people one Sunday a year. And they started with 12 kilometers. And with 12 kilometers, they were getting 70,000 people. You know, and one day I was bike riding with the mayor of Guadalajara, and I said, "Can you imagine, Mayor? Now we got all of these people walking and cycling. How else could you have all of these thousands?" Now it's at over 200,000 people. But when I rode with him, they were about 140,000 and 21 kilometers. Now it's grown a lot more. But even when they had the 140,000, I said, can you even imagine for a second, if these people were going to be playing soccer, you would need 4,666 soccer fields. And here you have not invested 1 cent in infrastructure. The roads are there, only operational. And this works in any city of any size. So I worked in Bogota, I worked in Guadalajara. 4 weeks ago, we did one Sunday in Portland. And actually, Paris is really fantastic. They got the Paris Plage. Once a year, they used to close some of the roads during 1 month of the year. And now, some of those same roads, they're closing them 52 weeks of the year. So during 1 month, they do all the Paris Plage, which is taking place right now. But the rest of the year, they close the road. Sundays from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. And it's Paris. I love these benches. You know, I have hundreds of photos of benches, but this is one of the benches that I like most of any park, because you got like 5 different groups of people doing 5 different activities, and no one really cares what the other 4 are doing. And look, New York started 2 weeks ago. Summer streets. This year, they're doing 3 Saturdays. If it works out, next year they're going to do 10, and from then on, from May to September. But what's really interesting is this. DOT, the Department of Transportation of New York, is doing this. And then they got dances and they got aerobics. And actually the commissioner, Janet, she came to Bogota for a weekend to take a look at what was going on. And I strongly recommend that you can either go to Guadalajara or Bogota, that I think are pretty much the two best programs. And they did something fantastic in New York. The bike decoration parades. Look at this. Park Avenue. Can you imagine getting the cars out on a Saturday on Park Avenue, because they open for people to walk and bike and skate and the children to paint and people to do aerobics and whatever. So I think this is fantastic. Before, 6 months ago, where they were just talking about it and we were preparing some documents and recommendations, people said, are you crazy? It will never happen. People will never allow to get their cars out of Park Avenue on Saturdays. Well, nothing is impossible. Look at this. And obviously the media plays a very important role. You got to involve the media in all of these things and all of the news and everybody got in order to get something. Wow, fantastic. So we got to be bold and ambitious. No more baby steps, major leaps. And actually this is Janet. And you know, one of the things when we were taking this photo, and that's the only reason we're putting the photo, the Commissioner of Parks and Recreation came by, and Adrian Binob, who's the Commissioner of Parks and Rec, he said, you know, Janet, this is the most fun activity that has taken place in New York in the last 40 years. And it's done by the DOT. Can you imagine that change of mind that the Department of Transportation are doing the most fun activities in a city? And it's great. That's the opportunity that transportation has. Transportation cannot be just an area. No one ever said that transportation was about moving cars from point A to point B. It's about moving people. It's about human. It's about creating cities. And about creating cities, let's move into built environment, because people say so sometimes walkable communities is about sidewalks. No, it's much more than sidewalks. And we can do a lot of things, even from small corners. I work with PPS in New York Project for Public Spaces. We did this in New Haven, Connecticut. In New Haven, Connecticut, they had this street corner that was one of the worst corners, very dangerous. When people were walking by or cycling, they wanted to go by as fast as possible. No one wanted to spend one more second that they needed to. It was dangerous, it was terrible, it was dirty. So then we got involved the community. And we did a meeting with the community, like with a blank piece of paper, and said, okay, what would you like to do? We don't have any designs, we don't have any ideas. What do you want? And then when you ask the community start providing fantastic ideas. So then someone said, oh, you know, all of this car parking, why don't we eliminate the first 3 car parking? Not all of it. After the 3rd spot, they can keep parking, but the first 3. And then someone else said, yeah, well, we could widen the sidewalk. And then someone else said, yeah, well, we could put a bench. And then another one said we could put a lamppost. And then someone said we could ask the private people to improve the facades or whatever. And all of a sudden, it went from that to this. You know? Fantastic. These are the kind of things that we got to work in the public space, which is why I'm so happy that the Vancouver Public Space Group is one of the sponsors of this, because can you imagine, this street corner became from one of the worst in New Haven to one of the best in New Haven. And if you don't have one street corner, but all of the zone is 5 or 10 or 20 street corners, then you got a fantastic place. But you have to decide, you know. Remember that this 40% growth of BC in the next 25 years, are we going to be doing streets for cars or streets for people? Because we can do either one. But if you live in this neighborhood, this is almost like raping the neighborhood right through. We don't care who lives around. This is really taking into consideration the neighborhood. So these are the kind of things. You know, it's not rocket science, but you know, 70% of the public space in LA is dedicated to car mobility. And I know I did an MBA at UCLA, and I saw those highways, how from 6 lanes they became 8, and they were full, then they became 10, they got full, they became 12, 14. Finally, now they're starting to put public transit. But nevertheless, in Paris, only 20% of public space is dedicated to car mobility. You know, and which city would you rather live? So you gotta also visualize changes. When you're gonna tell people we're gonna change something, it's really good to do drawings and to do options and to try to visualize so that people understand the entrance to a village, how it can be different. And tell people, would you rather live in a place where this was the main street, that you got parking on both sides, or would you rather have this? Parking only on one side, traffic calming, whatever. So these are the kind of things that can happen and create great city. This is in New York City, So visualize and do activities. And then now I want to talk a little bit about Bogota, because one thing in the program it said Bogota, so I got to talk about Bogota. But I'm going to talk about Bogota not so much because I was commissioner of Parks and Recreation or because one of my brothers was the former mayor, but because Bogota has 1/10 the per capita income that Canada has. So every time that you go to any elected officials or senior people in the local governments, they always say, oh, we don't have any money. So I want to show some of the things that we did with 1/10 the per capita income. I think Bogota, in many ways, so this morning CBC was asking me about lessons from Bogota to Vancouver. No, they are really in two different categories. I mean, Vancouver is one of the best cities in the world. But in Bogota was almost hopeless. Someone came up to me a little bit before and said, oh, I'm from Bogota. 15 years ago in Bogota, nobody even wanted to admit that they were from Bogota. No one. People said, oh, no, where are you from? Oh, no, I'm from Medellin, or I'm from Barranquilla, I'm from another city. And then they say, oh, but you don't talk like someone from Barranquilla. I said, oh, no, it's because I was born in Bogota, but I am from Barranquilla. So your parents are from Barranquilla? No, my grandparents are. And things have changed so much that now the guy that comes from Barranquilla to Bogota, 1 year later says, oh, I'm from Bogota. It changed. Now it's hopeful. People realize that the future is in their hands. Like from 95 to 2001, we designed and built 5 metropolitan parks, 50 zone parks, and we built over 800 neighborhood parks. The one that I like the most, and my kids, I have 3 kids, they say that this is my 4th one, is the Simon Bolivar, 360 hectares. This was before, and actually it was really nice because this is where the Pope came. He did a huge mass with 1 million people, and the mayor at the time, that was called Barco, he kept the land. There was a lot of pressure from private developers to develop it, but he did not allow it. They didn't do anything for 30 years, but at least the land was kept in the heart of the city, and this was after. The only thing that was done from here is they planted some trees, but there was not one sidewalk, not one trail, not one bench, what garbage. Everything that you see, it was put in 30 months. A lake of 13-hectare lake, all these sidewalks with separate facilities for pedestrians and for cyclists. A lot of these playgrounds, gigantic playgrounds, because it's a park of 360 hectares. We did a lot of concerts. Like when we're doing these concerts, we didn't really know how to do them. But you gotta be action-oriented. You gotta do it. So, like if you were here and you fainted, it took like 15 minutes to carry you over to the side. Then we brought Def Leppard. When we hired Def Leppard, they send their security people 2 weeks in advance. And they say, oh, no, you gotta do evacuation corridors. And so we learned, but we were doing in the process. We did a wave pool. We got to do partnerships. In the city, in every city around the world, there are so many silos and barriers between departments. So the Commissioner of Education needed to do a library. We needed to do a park. So we said, why don't you do the library with an underground parking, and we do a beautiful park around it. So then we partnered between commissioners. No silos, no barriers. It's one city, it's one taxpayer. So it's the same taxpayer in the city, in the region, in the province, in the country, and we got to eliminate all of those barriers. We build track and field and velodromes, and also be flexible. Now that you're doing in Vancouver all the things for the Olympics, like here they were going to do only a velodrome, and then we put inside inline skating track, and we got like 4 different sports in the same facility. And then they use the same parking, the same change rooms, the same everything. We created a festival, the summer festival, that now is in the 11th year. So when we were going to open the park, instead of doing a gigantic advertising campaign, we did a gigantic event. No advertising campaign, but an event. And we had over 100 activities in 10 days, and 3 million people on those activities. And movies and concerts and kite flying. 150,000 people went to the International Kite Flying Contest. So, but it's not only about big parks, even if they're very well used. This is a typical Sunday on a park. But also linear parks. Linear parks are very important. I love all kinds of parks, but the linear parks I like them because they connect. They connect people. High-income areas with low-income areas, residential with commercial, and whatever. For example, this is one that we did crossing the city, 29 kilometers, started in one of the wealthiest areas of the city. So we reconstructed this to sell flowers and things, but always separating the cyclists and the pedestrians so that there would not be any conflict. And then we keep going down. Every street crossing we put a bridge so that there would never be any conflict and it would be safe, and the cyclists would always go faster than if they had to go through all the lights. And then we kept going. It wasn't easy. Like people in this is a private golf course. They didn't want to have the cyclists and the pedestrians going by here because they were going to watch them play golf. My God. So we said, okay, you are tax exempt because you are a green area of public access. Okay, if you don't want people watching, put a wall, and then we start charging taxes. So they say, oh no, we welcome the bikeway. And this is where it ended, next to the Rio Bogota. This was before, and this was after. Can you imagine how, in one of the poorest areas of the city, so it went from one of the richest to one of the poorest, interconnecting area, can you imagine how the life changed for all of these people with a lot of, and at the time people were talking in Bogota, the Japanese Cooperation Agency, they were suggesting that Bogota should have elevated highways and whatever. Thank God, $5 billion was going to cost. This was a drawing in one of the papers, but it wasn't done, and instead other things were done. All of the parks used to park on the sidewalks, right in front of the stores. And then, so the sidewalks were rebuilt, the cars were taken off, and it was a huge fight. The retail owners wanted to impeach the mayor. And they hired people to collect signatures. They actually collected like 300,000 signatures to impeach the mayor. They needed 600,000. Right? But so I mentioned that because people always tend to think that the grass is always greener on the next door neighbor. So, oh no, it's easy because they're poorer, or it's easy because they're richer, easy because they got more winter, easy because they have less winter. No, it's never easy, but everything is doable. This was the previous transportation system, and instead of that, there was a BRT system. In 36 months was set up where the first line was carrying 600,000 people daily. And a lot of people call BRT systems everything. They put a bus and they say, oh, it's a bus rapid transit. No, the bus rapid transit really has to have dedicated corridors so that the buses actually can be rapid and can be transit. And you also got to have stations so that when the bus stops here, people have already paid in the station, and you can have 50 or 60 people going in and out in seconds. So people don't have to go one by one paying. So those are the kind of things that a bus rapid transit. That's why this has some lines that are carrying over 50,000 people. So it's quite interesting. And then how the linkages are made. And bicycles. When cities all across Canada are investing so much in public transit, public transit never is going to pick anybody up in their home or leave them at their place of work. So we got to have walkable and bikeable cities in order for transit to work. The other day I did a presentation at the Canadian Urban Transit in Halifax, and there were people from all across Canada. And I said, okay, how many of you, they were most of the CEOs and senior VPs, how many of you have someone reporting to the CEO that is whose only work is to think about pedestrians and cyclists? No one, not one. And everybody had dozens and dozens of engineers thinking about how big are the buses, how tall, how wide, what color, the seats, whatever, the trains, not one thinking full-time about pedestrians and cyclists. And then they go and say, oh, the parking. Like in Toronto, the GO stations, all of the GO stations, that is the train that takes people from the suburbs into the city, all of the parking lots are full. Each parking space is around $30,000, but not one of them has a nice pedestrian facility or even a bicycle parking with a small roof, nothing. When they should realize that each cyclist is one fewer car. So if you got 20 cyclists, it's 20 fewer cars. If you get 40 or 60 or 80, it's 80 fewer cars. So these are some of the kind of things that the transit system needs in order to have links. And separated bikeways, So it went in Bogota from less than 0.5% to almost 5%. These are some of the ones. a lot of those bridges so that people could really cross from one end to the other. The other day I went with some people from New York to do a video, and actually we have it on our website. If anybody goes to the website and clicks on it, they can see the video. We went one of the poorest areas of the city where there were not even paved roads, and some bikeways were done that these bikeways could be the top of the line almost in any city in North America. And they were done in some of the poorest neighborhoods. And then it was we got in, and it was at the time that the kids were coming into school, and it was beautiful to see how the parents were taking their kids to school. Look at how happy this girl is. Man. Really great. She's taking 3 in 1. Okay, so I know obviously all of that has a major influence, and there have been a lot of studies, the University of Chicago, and they have done studies on the impact and how the city has increased the green space and has increased also the transportation system and the bike paths and the ciclovia and all of this, and the impact on many things, on the environment, the quality of the air, the mobility, even homicides. Look at the homicide rate from 91 to 2006, how it's gone down. You know, it's not an issue of more police or more security. Is an issue of creating a city that more at the human scale. And I want to conclude mentioning a few things, thinking outside the box, because people say, you know, insanity, they say, is doing things the same way over and over and expecting different results. So how can we do things in a different way? You know, we really got to get outside the box, even if people are afraid that if you step out of the box, you fall on your head. That's fine, then you get up. But there's a lot more going on outside the boxes. With Gale Architects, we said, you know, most of the cities, they have different departments. Even just in one road, one department is thinking of the buildings. Another department is thinking on the traffic. Another one on the trees and the green spaces. Why don't we think in a more holistic way? Those are the kind of things that we got to generate and try and see how it could work. You know, in Seoul, Korea, they wanted to do a highway, and some transportation engineers said, oh, we got this river, let's do a highway on top of the river. No one is going to complain because we don't have to take any house down or whatever. So they did one, and then it got full. So someone said, why don't we do a second story? And then it got full of cars. And then when someone was saying, why don't we do a third floor? Someone came over and said, no, let's get the river out again. They took it down. Look, these are bold decisions, you know. They took it down, and then they had 2 lanes of cars, and they got bikeways and sidewalks and pedestrians and parks and whatever. The traffic congestion in London, you know, a bold decision in 2003, and they did it, and it was a success. And now public bicycles everywhere. This is something that Vancouver could have a fantastic possibility for the Olympic Games. You know, this is Paris, France. In Paris, cycling. Now, these public bikes, if you use them for less than 30 minutes, it's free. Now, when I was last November, they had a transit strike. And with a transit strike, they were having over 300,000 uses per day. Now they're having over 200,000 uses per day. But it's really, really fantastic. It didn't cost the city anything except the advertisement. They're putting out advertisement. But that's a scheme, a financial way of financing them. They got, you know, talking about difficult decisions. The other day I was at a presentation on Chicago on their bike system, that the mayor of Chicago says that he wants to become the most bike-friendly city in North America. And they were saying that they have not taken one car parking out. Well, in Paris, just for the bicycle stations, let me show you. Just for these stations, there are 1,451 stations. They took out 7,000 car parking, on top of all the car parking that are taken to create the bikeways, because they haven't completed their bike network. But so some of it is combined, and some of them is not as safe. But they created a basic grid, a basic network. So 7,000 cars just for this car parking. So you know it's not magic, you know. This is, let me show you something very interesting. This avenue used to be 8 lanes. It's the Boulevard Montparnasse. 8 lanes, full of cars. And the car wanted to make it 12. And the mayor said, you know, instead of 12, I'm going to make it 4. And in the 4, what am I going to do with the other 4? I'm going to make really wide sidewalks, a bikeway physically separated from the cars, and in the middle, he put in this light rail, which has grass on top, so whenever there is not a train going by, it has the look and feel of a park. But this is, from 8 this was 3 years ago. So it's not, some people say, oh, Europe, it's because Europe was done 200 years ago. No, this was 3 years ago. And this is, can you imagine the change of the city in that? So these are the kind of things. This is City Hall in Paris and their public bicycle system. And we see now people of all ages, all ethnicities, and this is one of their workshops. And I'm going to end with Copenhagen, because Copenhagen has many things in common with Vancouver, and I think that everything that is taking place in Copenhagen is applicable to Vancouver. And many things that are taking place in Vancouver can be done in Copenhagen. One of the nice things about Copenhagen is about the weather is worse than Vancouver, because it rains as much, but it's much colder, so they got a lot of snow in the winter. But obviously they're much closer to the North Pole. And actually, I work with Jan-Gel, and Jan-Gel, he sent me this photo the other day, telling me how he celebrated his 45th wedding anniversary. We went on a bike ride with his wife, and he said, a city is nice when you can go, 2 people that together they have 136 years, and they can go for 21K around the city without ever having any contact with the cars. And then he sent me the photo of his mom and his mother-in-law, one age 85, the other one age 92. And they used their bike as their mode of transportation. Whenever they started, they closed some roads. We were talking about some public spaces in Vancouver, plazas and squares. When in Copenhagen, they were going to close some of these roads and make pedestrian streets. 30 years ago, people were very upset. People, the retail, they said, oh, we're going to go broke. Here we have too many cars. That's not part of our culture. They said, oh, to be on the public space, that's for the Italians. The Italians are loud and noisy, but we are Danish and we are very serious and we don't like to go out. Well, now the Danish are more Italians than the Italians. Look at the pedestrian. And once they did, and actually the retail, the most expensive retail in Copenhagen is the one on the pedestrian streets. And once one of the pedestrian streets worked, 10 years later they did another, and then another, and then another. And now they got a whole network of pedestrian streets. Look, this is what we need in Vancouver. We need people cycling, little girls, their mothers, older people, men, women, everything. Cycling has doubled in Copenhagen in the last 15 years. So when people tell you, oh no, it's always been like this, look, these are the numbers, 1970, 75. Look, in 2000, more people are coming into the city center in bikes than in other modes. 36%, the modal split in Copenhagen is 36% cycling, 70% pedestrians, 23% cars, 33% transit. Did all of this happen because enlightenment, they were illuminated or something? Not so. People were doing a lot, they were protests, they went to the streets, they did major demonstrations in the centers, in the squares, they organized. Now there's a political election coming by. You gotta get all of the candidates involved, left, right, center, young, old, whatever. How are they gonna commit to the bicycle infrastructure of Vancouver? In the greater Vancouver, in this municipality of Vancouver, and all of the municipalities in the metropolitan area. Because this is the kind of things that we need. 70% of them use it in the snow. But also it's because you have physically separate. Here are the pedestrians, here are the cyclists, there are the cars. And also it gets plowed and it gets cleaned. Look at this. Even in their mink coats, they go out. So then when it doubles, then you get traffic jams. But what a nice problem to have traffic jams of cyclists. So now obviously they want more paths and they want wider and they want all of this, So all of this is, and actually one of the things they do is measure. Here in North America, we count everything. We can tell you how many cars went by here, in March 23rd, 1998. But we have no idea how many pedestrians went by yesterday. So one of the things we gotta count the pedestrians and the cyclists and the cars and the public spaces and the people that are on the tables outside. Copenhagen, every other year, they come up with a study that is called the City of Cyclists, and it's on their website. One of the things they show is how the cyclists, like the kilometers are increasing and the accidents are coming down. And, you know, they just came out with a plan. The mayor of Copenhagen came out with a very ambitious plan. They want to go to 50% of bike share. They are already at around 40, between 38 40%. They want to go to 50% by 2015. 50% reduction of accidents and 80% increase in feeling safe while cycling. So very measurable goals. They want to be the city, the large city with the most bike share in the world. Although they are doing very well, and Vancouver is doing very well in many other ways, but you cannot be complacent. You know, sometimes one of the things that is hard to do is to go from good to great, because when cities are good, they say, "Oh no, we're already good." So then they become very risk averse and they become very timid. No, if you are good, build on that foundation and become even better, and always strive to be better. You know, and you know there is more to walking than walking. These are the kind of things that we gotta do, because also in the public spaces, they have to be managed. Successful public places, 1/3 of it is design, 2/3 is management. In North America, we put so much emphasis in managing the indoor places. We build an arena, we build a community center, we find money for the manager, for the supervisor of fitness, supervisor of aquatics. We invest millions in public places, in parks, whatever, and then we don't have any money to manage it, to do community engagement, community involvement, programming, activities, events, whatever. So these are the kind of things. Look, the pedestrian street is very popular even on rainy days. And if the weather report says it's going to rain, no problem. You bring your umbrella and you go on your bike. And if it rains, that's fine. No one is going to die from riding their bike in the rain. If you have safe facilities, even if you have a mini skirt, they go right. And what kind of shoes do they use in Copenhagen? Even the ones that women use to kick their boyfriends when they don't behave, which are these. It's not about riding in spandex 20 to 40s. It's about everyday life, walking and cycling as a normal part of everyday life all year round. You know, it's in the winter you put heaters, and then look at you think it's better for economic development to have this place for 120 cars parked, or eliminate the parking and all of a sudden have one of the best streets and retail and restaurants and shopping and activities. Those are the kind of decisions that you gotta make. So great public places for all seasons. And even in the smaller towns, 55,000 inhabitants, same thing, pedestrian streets, 63,000. Because sometimes people say, oh, it's only the big cities. No, also the small ones. Everyone benefits from all of these activities.